No, I don't think I was surprised. Clearly the enemy was surprised.
We're going for a fight.
Losing 48 friends and colleagues, that was horrendous.
Once you dropped a fire mission, the enemy would go up and inspect the craters.
And there was a massive firefight going on. There was just rounds and shit going.
There is a white flag flying over Stanley. Very marvellous.
The conflict began on the 2nd of April when Argentine forces invaded the Falkland Islands.
A lovely, lovely man, a very good friend of mine, Diego Garcia Quiroga. Diego, he was there, he spoke perfect English, and he shouts, Mr. Hunt, come out, we're Argentine Marines, we've cut your telephone cables, come out with your hands up. Sergeant Bill Muir shouts out, F off, I won't swear, F off, you spick bastards. And suddenly everyone just erupts with fire at everyone, and they realized it was getting intense, and an Argentine squad with Diego in it as well rushes around the back, vaults the wall, and tries to run into the house and kidnap the governor. And unfortunately for them, they run into 4 Royal Marines, and there's what a lot of people described as like a mini gunfight at the OK Corral, with 5 of them, 4 of our guys blazing away from the hip.
There's a lot of machine gun fire and fairly small arms fire as well.
Oddly enough, you won't see this. No one ever mentions the first prisoners of the entire Falklands War were 3 Argentines, and Cardillo, Flores, and Ledesma were their names. And they came up with a wonderful story afterwards, how they were battling the Marines and everything else. They weren't. They were in hiding the whole time.
Just a minute. If you take the gun out of my back, I'm going to transmit that to you.
There were not quite 70 of us today. When we come back, he said, we're bringing the whole corps. There'll be 7,000 of us then. And he said, you should have seen him. The guy was crying. He said, he goes, it's going to start in the mind games already.
An act of aggression had been committed on British territory, and Argentina must be persuaded, by force if necessary, to withdraw.
Within days, she had dispatched 2 aircraft carriers, dozens of warships, and thousands of troops.
But before that, we'd had the O Group, and the company commander had called us in, and he told us about the Battle of Goose Green, and that was the 28th of May. That was the day that Colonel Jones was killed, and 17 others of his battalion and a Royal Marine in the first land battle. And up to that point, we had no idea it was happening. Of course, my mother in Wales knew more about the Falklands War than I did, and so it came as a complete surprise to discover that a battalion attack had been put in. It was a very gutsy thing. Got great respect for the Paras, massively outnumbered. None of the support they expected just went in cold. And it was, but to hear that the CO had been killed along with everybody else, that was a real shock. And then on top of that, the final bit of information that we got was that the World Service had announced this to the enemy before they actually attacked. The BBC World Service told the world, including the enemy, that we were about to attack Goose Green. And Colonel Jones apparently said in his O Group he was going to sue the bastards when he got back. Well, obviously he didn't.
We were all standing around waiting and listening to the BBC World Service when we heard a voice out of the radio grassing us up. Captain Wood came straight across to us and he says to no one in particular, gentlemen, the promotional prospects in this battalion tomorrow are going to be fucking excellent. He got killed a few hours later.
The first helicopter, the pilot had been shot and they crashed and they were both killed. Andy Evans and his co-pilot managed to land in the water, and they were swimming ashore when they were shot in the water by the Argentines. So there was no need for them to die, really. And Andy was mortally wounded. His colleague got him to the shore, and they were picked up by Surgeon Commander Rick Jolly in a helicopter. And unfortunately, though, they were by the time the helicopter got to Canberra and us, Andy Evans had died, and his crewman was uninjured, but obviously emotionally badly scarred.
Saturday the 12th, the men of the 2nd Parachute Battalion didn't have to wait long at Fitzroy, and they were delighted.
We didn't see the point in Bergen's. We loaded up in fighting order, which is, you know what fighting order is. It's just your weapon with as much ammo as you can carry. We're going for a fight. We're not going to sleep overnight. You don't want your spare Demons, your spare boots, we're going on like an advance to contact sort of thing. And we'd all rushed into cover. And I had my platoon had no cover. There was like peat banks that the local people dig for peat. And the majority of C Company had got into these peat banks. And the anti-tank platoon and support company, but we'd been attached to C Company. The anti-tank platoon, there was no peat banks. And we were just stuck out in the middle of nowhere, trying to dig shell scrapes while we were lying with our hands, trying to just claw the ground, because the rounds were only just passing over our heads. If I would have went like that, my hand would have come off. That's how low it was. It's passing just over us. And unbeknownst to me, I only found out when I was writing the book. Sergeant Martin Baird, who was to our left, he was in cover, and he said to the CO of C Company, the anti-tanks over there, they've got no cover. They're pinned down, them lads. We'll have to get them lads out of here. And then the machine gun fire started taking effect, hitting people. Corporal Hope, he was with A Company, and he took one through the head. He's still alive, but it was a fatal wound, if you know what I mean. Corporal Hope took one. Then I took one. It caught me from the left. It went through my nose, hit me cheekbone, took my eye out and me cheekbone out, and somehow me jaw smashed together and me top teeth out at the same time, and threw me backwards. My helmet come off, because I never had it after that, and my mate shouted over to me. I must have made a noise, and he shouted, "Are you all right?" And I immediately, when I got it, I put my hand to my face, and I thought, I've got a big hole in my face.
40 was left back at San Carlos, and we were all a little pissed off about that. Obviously they were going to move us forward in two separate occasions, but the plans got changed on an hourly basis. So we ended up staying in San Carlos for quite a long time, even though we'd done all these yonks getting ready, until the Sir Galahad got hit.
I'm looking down this big long line of burnt faces and people that look really, really bad, blisters and skin hanging off them because they've been burnt, which is a horrible picture to see, and people smouldering because the clothes have been on fire. And so all these charcoaled faces and burnt faces.
There's one bit on your Wikipedia page where your mother was walking through the hospital and she looked at you and she turned to her friend or relative and went, "Oh, look at that poor chap." And you went, "Mum, it's me."
Possibly 5 o'clock at night, we knew there was something coming up. Back to action stations, fully booted and spurred. The aircraft came in and we followed them for a while, and then we lost them. We knew there was things going on in Bomali, because we could actually see explosions. You can see what's going on over there in the distance. And then all of a sudden we picked up aircraft on our radar. They'd basically gone through Falkland Sounds and the cover of the hills, came out the other side. We had a boat next beside us, which was the Glasgow. Brilliant. The Brilliant was next to us. She was short range, so she would pick up short range stuff. The aircraft were picked up short range. We got a lock. The lock failed because we couldn't identify land an aircraft together. Four aircraft came in, or four aircraft came in. I could actually see the aircraft through the bridge window. You could see the small arms fire going up, and the old-fashioned Oerlikon that the Coventry had. You could literally see the whites of the eyes of the pilots. They were that low. One bomb was dropped, and I watched it drop, and it was just like slow motion. It just seemed like deadly silence. And I watched it, and I watched it hit the water, and then I watched it bounce, because I thought it was going to come straight into the bridge window, and it just went over the bridge. Then it landed the other side, and it caught the stern of our sister ship and went up and out the flight deck and took the helicopter off.
Wow.
Within seconds, there was another three bombs came in. One went below me into the computer room. One went midships and one went aft. They all exploded. And you could feel the ship starting to tilt already. But it was the silence. It was the silence of engines, not communications, not radio, not air conditioning, not. The ship was dead in matter of seconds, just total silence.
It felt like a carnival. It was just, we were still in that peacetime mentality. We'd got off the ship, so a huge sense of relief. We'd got ashore without being fired at, and now we can shoot at these things in the sky. It was mayhem. We yomped off the landing craft and straight up a hill, a place called Port San Carlos, and that's where the reality sunk. The Bergens were massive, and it was just a very slow breathing out your backside sort of plod up the hill. My order was to go to a building called New House. I can't remember the precise distance now, but I would say less than 10 miles away. But over that country, there were no roads, no tracks, nothing. It was just rough country. It was very, very hard going. The navigation wasn't difficult because although there are no features worthy and certain sections of the map were just blank, and with the words cloud obscured written on them. So there were no features whatsoever, no contours or anything. What there was were the fences, and there are no trees in the Falklands outside of Stanley, the Port Stanley, the capital. But there are the fences, and that you can rely on them. So that was the one aid which confirmed where you were. Otherwise, it was bearing and paces. And as we'd just been doing that for 3 months in the jungle, that wasn't a problem. That first day was a real eye-opener. We kept going through until last light. We stopped for a scran. I remember us all leaning against the fence, and the fence went twang, and we all fell over backwards. We were like dead ants. We couldn't get up. It's the only time I've actually seen people having to lift each other up. You couldn't put this Bergen on and get up. And you certainly couldn't stand up and put it on. You had to lie on your back, roll over, and somebody had to help you up. And the other taboo which we broke was never lean on your weapon. Well, it was impossible not to do that, and guys were using these as a kind of crutch, really. We stopped for scran, and then the order came, carry on. And so we did. And we found this. We never actually saw the building. I stopped at 3 o'clock in the morning where I thought we were supposed to be. It was a huge swag. I was navigating, obviously, but there was no way of confirming it. And it wasn't until the following few hours later when light came up that I saw the building. I thought, oh, pretty good, sure, not bad. But that first night we were drained, utterly, totally drained. So much so that we just went into a huge circle. So you have 650 blokes in a massive circle. How accurate, I have no idea because it was dark. And didn't even bother putting a bivvy up. Of course, bivvies need trees. That was one thing we'd overlooked. So the bivvies were pretty amateurish, but didn't even bother with that. And of course, predictably, it rained. And so the sleeping bags got soaking wet, which meant they now weighed 3 times what they weighed before. It was an admin disaster. And at a stand to the following morning, there was that sort of bleary-eyed reality, oh my giddy aunt, where's the Chinooks? There aren't any Chooks, carry on. That's how it began.
C Company were moved into the Pucara pilots' bashers, which happened to be the sheep shearing accommodation during the sheep shearing season. And we'd moved into the Pucara pilots' Bukhara Pirates bashers, and they had shit everywhere. They'd shit in the beds, fucking floor, cut the water off, done absolutely everything. Dirty bastards.
We got a front row seat to see the most amazing firefight and display of warfare that I've ever experienced. The shells coming in from the ships, I can't remember, I think it might have been broadsword, or I can't remember how many it was supporting 4-2, but just lifting the top of that mountain up, and you're like, how the hell can anybody survive up there with that naval bombardment going in before the battle? And then you saw the tracers, and then the battle was on, and it was just like, how can anybody survive? And to the amazement, only 2 Royal Marines lost their lives. One was my Lofty Watts. He was my training team corporal. So RIP Lofty. He was a good bloke. But only 2 was amazing for just looking at it. You thought, how can anyone survive that? So
SAS was given tasks that were outrageous with nothing, not even a proper map, nothing, And, I parachuted down there as part of an 8-man team to do a build-up within a war zone. We eventually met up with an old O-class submarine, HMS Onyx, and we dispersed onto islands around the major islands. Some were inhabited by Argentinians, some weren't, just to get our drills squared away, because we were going to the mainland to take out the super étendards that were sinking our ships. So the 8 of us were going to leave the submarine, go on the coast of Argentina, and attempt to take out these aircraft. Now, that was a huge mission for 8 guys. And we were supplemented by 2 fantastic SBS coxswains, both who I know well, they're mates. And because they had to return the boats back to the submarine, because had we hid them and they were found, we were compromised. And had we slashed them and sunk them, they'd have been washed ashore. So they had to be returned to the submarine. So it was a joint operation. And to cut a long story short, on our way in, having done all this build-up training, and we did some operations with D Squadron as part of the war, on the way in, the Argentinians and the Falklands surrender. So they obviously heard we were coming.
The Scots Guards, they said, had taken Tumbledown, and the Gurkhas were advancing on Mount William.
There was a kiddie swing outside the school, and the Argies had put this multi-barreled rocket launcher tied onto it, obviously fire it remote. So we sort of made for that. And then as we were going, a lad called Jock Boland, turned around and says, they're coming behind us. And as he turned to sort of turn around, this fucking rocket went right across him from this swing, from this multi-barreled rocket launcher, and one of the fins sliced his chest open. So he's there on the ground, fucking lung hanging out. Blokes are trying to sort him out. Another guy goes down, gets shot. All this is going on for about an hour or so. We're actually trying to move. We're trying to penetrate through into these positions of these Argies. Next minute, we go and attack the schoolhouse. Patrol's done a good job on that, which there was about 80 Argies in there firing across us. So that had to be taken out, which was, the schoolhouse was the biggest building on the islands at that time, but it was all made of wood. So I was up past the swings and I heard of the attack, and there were some boys from D Company that came across as well. And I fired my 66 onto the roof because I could make out the right-hand side of the roof, but it just bounced off. And then somebody else fired another 66 and went into one of the windows, set it on fire. A few of the other boys, we had these M79s. We call them plot guns. You know, they fire the N79 40mm HE grenade. They were firing them in. And as the Argies as the schoolhouse went up on fire, the Argies were escaping out the back, and because it was right by the scene, down the re-entrant, down the behind the estuary and onto the beach, and obviously back down into Goose Green. And that's where the blokes had a bit of a turkey shoot there. I'm sorry to say use those phrase turkey shoots, but I mean, to be realistic, you have to use that because that's what it was. You know, you look back at it now, 40 years later, 39 years later, and I've got no regrets on anything I did there, because at the same time that's happening, my mate Mino, who's a young 18-year-old lad, had the problem with the white flag, literally 50 metres to my right. He was part of D Company. They were going to come over and give us fire support for the schoolhouse, but he didn't make it because the Argies had a big Argentine flag up. Then they a couple of them stood up, apparently with some white kecks around a stick, wanting to take a surrender. Now, there's a bit of controversy there because a couple of the lads went up to take the surrender from, I think it was, I'm not sure what platoon it was in D Company, but the officer was Jim Barry. He went to take the surrender, and Mino was saying, "Don't fucking go up there, boss, don't go up there." So he went up there, and Paul Sully, corporals, good mate of mine, Sully, and Mino, not Mino, Nigel Smith went up, Lance Corporal, with the boss, with Jim Barry. And basically they got wiped out.
Four Mirages attacked us that afternoon. 3 went down.
And he called Corporal McLaughlin forward to set a fire base amongst these rocks and said, "Scout, keep an eye out for us. I'll let you know when we go forward." So he shouted up to Scout, "We're moving out now." So they moved out. And as they're moving out, suddenly all the Argies come to life again and start firing. Corporal Bailey's goes down. Private McLaren, he dives into cover. Lance Corporal Roger James dives into cover. Corporal Sergeant Mackay goes missing. And then, this is the Argie telling me, he said, the firing stopped. And out of nowhere, Sergeant Mackay is in front of their position, in front of their trench, with a grenade, ready to lob it in his trench. And he said, we just all went bang, 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 bang. And he said, this is what he said. He said he appeared in front of us and almost stopped for a moment, as if surprised, and then went like that to lob the grenade in the trench. And he said, we all shot him and he fell in front of us. And he said, his body was smoking. And he said, I reached out to he had a radio on, he had a Klansman. And he said, I reached out and his friend pulled him back. And they sat in the trench wondering what's going to happen next, like, you know. And then 4 platoon, they sent another, because they had to report back and say, platoon commander's down, Sunray Minor is missing, we don't know where he is, could be dead, could be, anything could have happened. What do you want us to do? So they sent Sergeant Des Fuller to come down and take over the platoon. So he took over and just said, right, we're just going to carry on pushing forward. So they moved, well, they said, right, fix bayonets. And they were in the cover of some rocks, fix bayonets, we'll move out and we'll just attack this RG position. And that's what they done. And more casualties were taken and what have you. But Gustavo, who was still he was in the position, he was shot. All the lads are running around doing what they do, you know, grenades, bayonet, everything. And Gustavo said, I was lying on the bottom of the trench. And he said, I was shot while I was lying on the bottom of the trench. And he said, he said, I thought to myself, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me. And he said, I was lying, been shot once. He said, and I remember them. He was shouting. And he wrote it as he could hear it. But I think he was shouting, he heard what John Lewis was shouting. John Lewis was there, and John Lewis was shouting, position clear, position clear. And he said it went quiet for a moment, and he said, I could smell smoke. He must have lit up, because for the nerves and what have you, And he said, I could smell smoke and I could hear it. And he said, they lamented, that was his word, not mine. They lamented for their fallen Ian Mackay. He said, they lamented for their commander. And he went unconscious, and he lay in that trench. And eventually, 4th Platoon pulled back and called another fire mission down on that position. But you got to give the RGs the due. They held that position. Even with all that artillery bombardment, they just what it is. That mountain is just solid granite, and if you get yourself in one of them nooks and crannies, nothing's going to get you out of it, because the walls are 3 foot thick. It's going to take something to get you out of them. That's why, to be honest, when 3 Para took the mountain, they just occupied the Argentine positions because they were that good. They were brilliant. But anyway, Corporal McLaughlin comes forward again. He tried to take that 50 cal out, but you just couldn't get near them. They had machine. You just couldn't get near them. They fired 66s at it, threw grenades at it. They could have held that position, but the CO said, pull back. We're going to flatten it again. So they flatten that position again. Corporal McLaughlin pulls back again. I say, once again, he's evacuating the wounded. He's, honest to God, the man was a star all night. How he walked up, well, he didn't walk away, but how he got nothing, I'll never know. Because every single man there knew Corporal McLaughlin is the man,
The gun crews, mostly 17 years old, soon had more battle experience than anyone else in the Navy.
And we were a very short distance when we came under fire from the left flank, basically underneath this cliff face, and it was a proper cliff. It was such a cliff, in fact, that nobody considered actually getting on top of it to clear it. We didn't think there'd be any enemy up there, so it was irrelevant. However, it turned out not to be. This machine gun opened up on us. It was a straightforward thing. I just said to Corporal Bell on left flank, you deal with it. I think Corporal Siddle was on the right flank. I said, you support him. So Harry moved sort of further around to hook and get an angle on it. Dinger turned around to Jock and said, Jock, you deal with it. Jock apparently put his flag down on a rock, cocked his 66, fired it, and that was the end of the battle.
we had quite a few of them already on board, wounded, and that's when that picture was taken with me with the SLR in this relatively small room, and that was taken to show that we were actually looking after the prisoners quite well. And then hostilities ended. The RGs threw the towel in, and Canberra picked up about 4,000 of them. And we had 100 Welsh guards come on board as guards, prison guards, and we took them all back to Argentina.
It was coming towards the end of the campaign, and we were supposed to go into Argentina and on a one-way mission to take out the jets that were sinking our ships. But the mission finally got cancelled, so our commanding officer managed to get us permission to fly down and do another mission, possibly coming into Port Stanley from the rear. But so there were 2 aircraft with 65 SAS soldiers bursting to get into the war still, flying down. One of the aircraft's refueling nozzle broke, so that one had to turn back. So now there's 35 of us, and we get down there, and all our equipment has been prepared by the RAF in 1-ton boxes to go out the back on heavy drop parachutes. So we're all standing there waiting to jump out in dry suits. Out goes all our equipment, and all the parachutes come off. And so, and we follow it out, and all our equipment is bombing the ships that are waiting in the sea to pick us up. So there we are, 35 men from B Squadron, 22 SAS arrived to take part in the war. And most of our kit goes to the bottom of the ocean. We get picked up and put on the ship. But the Argentinians, the Argentinians
heard that these 30 men from B Squadron 22 SAS had arrived, and 2 days later they surrendered. So, yeah, job done.
Hey, they're only human, mate.
Gentlemen, I've just heard that the white flag is flying over Stanley. Hooray!
There is a white flag flying over Stanley. Very marvellous.
What I did not ever doubt was the quality of the men.
Marvellous forces, every single one of them. It's just been everyone together, and that's what matters. We knew what we had to do.